So today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Obviously you can see that I'm inside a house here, and I'm going to be talking to two builders today that have a background in not only architecture but also civil engineering. Their names are Tiziano and Natasha, and they own a company here in Miami called Turns and Company. So I'm going to go over a lot of the questions that you guys asked in the community post I put up a few days ago, because ever since we had this fire situation here in LA, and also we've had a lot of hurricane damage over the past couple of years, so we're going to go over some things that people could be doing to build homes better, because obviously the way they're doing it right now clearly isn't working. So we're going to go over some of these important things that I can't answer but the professionals can. Tiziano, Natasha, thank you guys for doing this with me.
You're welcome.
No.
So,
It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, I want to just make you guys comfortable, and we're just going to get into the things that you know best about. So the first thing I want to talk about is whenever people are going to build a home, obviously the first thing you need is a piece of property. You know, that's how it all starts. You need to have the land.
Correct.
And one thing that somebody brought up that I thought was very interesting in this post is they're talking about how you have a property, for example, that has trees on it that are maybe 100, 200 years old. And they talked about how, you know, when they had the last hurricane in Florida, for example, they had hardly any damage on their property versus people who had their, you know, properties bulldozed, you know, a couple of decades ago, and they just plant whatever there. Then they're the ones who see the most damage. So if you guys want to talk about just first, like how to go about even picking the right location to build a house to begin with, because everybody needs to start with that one piece of land.
Right. So, Natasha, if you want to start,
You can start.
yeah. Technically, it's a very important point. Of course, is the where you're going to be building your dream. But at the same time, especially here in South Florida, it's kind of tricky right now because people are going to choose the location, especially the neighborhood, by the better school or better access to restaurants and the city and downtown. So end of the day, at least here in South Florida, we don't have that much options to get, you know, a property that you have full of trees. And the guy is totally correct. If you can build a house that you have these natural barriers that will help you. Even actually, you can see here some of the places that suffer through hurricanes, and you have like a palm tree or something in front of that, and the damages is way less than those communities where they bulldoze everything and do 200, 300 houses, you know?
Right.
So definitely, if you do have the option to have a good landscaping, a good natural barrier, natural protection, it will help during these difficult times.
Okay. Obviously, you know, the location is important, but a lot of people then, they just kind of pick what they think is affordable. They pick what they like based on their location more than anything. Then people don't really take that into consideration then when building a house. Is that it?
Absolutely. I think that's what we see most. Everything is based on access to better places, to better schools, like we said, to have roads close to a mall, to better commercial spaces. Everything is based on a location that better suits you, right? For where you can better find the things that you need, let's say. So people don't think about it, okay, this is a flood zone, so I might have problems in the future because I'm buying this land or this property and it's I don't know how many years old, and I don't know how is the flood situation in this area. People don't even like think about it. They just go for it, and in a few years when they actually have a problem, then they were gonna be like, oh, oops,
Right.
now what I'm gonna do,
Right.
you know? And I think this is for not only US, all other countries, it's like that right now. So yes, it's correct. People are based on what better suits them and what they can find around these properties, not based on natural events. Let's
Right.
say you don't think that's gonna happen to you, right? You don't think you're gonna get a cancer or something like that. You just go for it, and when it happens, you were like, oh, now I need to
Now we
think
need
about
to think about it.
Yeah. So what is your role as a home builder in that? Do you guys have any say in that? Do you like try to advise clients, maybe you should buy this piece of land instead, or do you have any influence on that, or you just like, well, they give you a piece and this is what we're working
Not
with?
exactly, because at the time that we start, at the time that we get involved, most of the time that we get involved on this project, the client it's already involved with an architect. They already went through the drawings. They already had all the concept, the place. They are even way advanced on the architectural drawings and construction drawings. So at the end of the day, we are almost at the stage of applying the permits to the city.
Right.
What's the perfect scenario? Some contractors, some companies, and some clients actually, they rather do a contract build. So they will get a contractor involved since the beginning. Now, honestly, by our experience here in South Florida, I really don't foresee like someone recommending, oh, let's get a place, I don't know, in Kendall or in Okeechobee or something, because you will have a better barrier, you know, or avoid getting to the coast. Actually, people want to be in front of the beach. They want to have that. So we kind of don't have that much influence on this stage. But as Natasha said, everybody wants to be near a nice school for your children. And if you have a nice restaurant or hotels, or you are in front of the beach, or if you have access to commercial space. So I think that's that's pretty much right now, at least from our experience, and actually what we expect when we are seeing some places, you know.
So essentially the location is an afterthought for a lot of people, really. It's more just about the actual location of the property than how safe it is to build there.
Correct.
And I think one of the things, like as a general contractors, we don't get to that point of recommend to a client or to guide them in these situations, because like Tiziano said, they come to us basically ready to go, right?
Correct.
But it could be helpful if they did that.
Exactly.
If they were
So,
more proactive.
One of the things that happens, like as an architect, we always try, and I think most of the professionals sometimes try, as an architect or an engineer, is to recommend to the client the best materials, the best way to build, right? But everything comes to an end with the subject cost.
Yeah.
Right?
At the end, everything goes back to
well,
cost.
I'm buying a property and I want to build a house for $1 million, okay? But so as an architect, I will recommend you how to build, and I will give you the option. Here's your house, and this is gonna cost $1 million. And here's the house, same look, exactly like you want. I took out of your mind and put it on a paper to be built. And I'm gonna say this other one, you have the options to be fireproofed or resilient to all natural events that you can get in this area, right? But this is gonna cost you $2 million.
Right.
So how far are you going for this? You know, okay, Natasha, but all the houses in my neighborhood, they are in the price range of $1 million. Why am I building one that is gonna cost $2 million?
Right.
You know, so you have like that hard decision. So how can we manage this? How can we balance this? And
I see.
you know, like, so it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah. Well, that's going to bring me right into the next thing, is going to be, you know, construction method and construction materials, because a lot of the questions that people had were surrounding this, you know, especially now that we've seen this happen with the fires, and obviously there's been a lot of houses here in Florida that don't survive the hurricanes, things like that. So let's start with, first of all, obviously since we're here in Florida, how do you guys recommend, as far as construction method goes, for building a house? Some people are asking about, maybe it's better to build houses out of concrete. Maybe it's better to build houses with 3D printing. Maybe it's better to use the ICF concrete. So there's different things that people are wondering about, like what's the best way to build a house here in Florida to make sure it can survive a Category 5 storm? Because obviously flood damage is a big issue, but so is the wind. So, you know, what kind of house essentially you're looking at building that can be future-proof for Florida?
Right. I think to really understand what we have here, especially in Florida, we need to go back a little bit to 1992 when we have the Hurricane Andrew. Up to then, the Florida building code was not as restricted as we have today. They were using municipalities and some counties reference to build those houses. So at that time, construction in the United States started. The root of the construction was with wood. So wood was well available in the United States.
Let me just interrupt you for a second,
Yes.
because a lot of people say, well, over here in Europe, because I have a lot of people who watch from Europe, everything's built out of concrete and stone, or, you know, blocks, whatever, bricks. So what about?
Because they have a shortage of wood there.
Right.
They have no forest
Right.
anymore. So, and the supply here was always like
It's abundant.
huge.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
Okay.
that's a cultural point, and you cannot just change that, you know, from in 1 month or 1 year or 10 years. It's something that came for centuries. So up to that point, they were not that strictly in terms of inspecting and allowing the constructions of this type of houses. And then we had Andrew. A lot of changed after Andrew, where, as an example, right now in Florida, you have to have hurricane-proof windows and doors. That's a fact. Some of the places that are near the coast, like 3 miles from the coast, you have to withstand a Cat 5 hurricane, which you have winds of 180 miles an hour. Now, if you are inland, you can design your house to withstand a Cat 3, Cat 4, which will be 110, 150 miles per hour, which is totally fine. Besides that, you also, what people call the shell, which is the structure of the house. We've been working in Brazil, in the Bahamas, and in Miami, in South Florida especially, for the last 10 years. And every single project that we did, since single family homes to buildings and hotels, they use reinforced concrete as the structure of the house. And then inside you can play around. You can use a steel frame, you can use wood frame, it's not a problem. But definitely after Andrew and all these changes on the building code, people start to be more restricted, let's say, you know. So when you are doing the walls of your house, the structure of your house, and you, even if you are using wood trusses, they implemented the method of hurricane straps. So technically they are attaching those wood trusses to the top of your walls or your structure, and it's impossible for the hurricane to take. No, of course it's not impossible. We had in end of 2019 we have Dorian, which was the hurricane that passed through the Bahamas, and unfortunately, I believe for the first time in history, that hurricane he got like stuck in one place for the whole day and completely destroyed several of those islands. We did several jobs in those islands. We have houses that they were completely fine structural wise, but the roofing was like 3 houses on the neighbor, like completely flew.
Right.
Oh, was a roofing issue? We can't exactly say what was the issue, but it could be a palm tree that flew to the window, and then you create an opening and the wind, the pressure will completely take the roofing. You have several options, several reasons that happen. But if we had the proper straps, that for sure will help that a lot. But going back to your question, where people, and I saw a lot of people, especially after the fires in LA, asking why houses are not built specific in concrete today.
Right.
I guess the main question is cost. Everything will go back to cost. So it's not about only the cost comparison between the concrete, the reinforced concrete, and the wood. Wood is way lighter and easier to work than concrete. some communities actually you have to keep a certain architectural standard in the community. You can never, if you have a neighborhood that was built in the 60s or the 70s and you want to do a modern house at the same place, they will not allow, the city will not allow you to do that. So sometimes you kind of get stuck to the wood. You can replace some of those things for concrete. Yes, you can. But concrete, besides being a little bit more expensive, it requires more skilled laborers to do the work, and it requires more time. You have an option to purchase a home that is in reinforced concrete, and it's going to cost you $800,000. And the neighbor, same square footage, same type of house, but was built in wood, and will cost $600,000. What are you going to do? Honestly, people kind of don't think. Most of people don't think on that when they get to this kind of decisions,
right.
And they end up with the wood. Another point I think it's important to mention, especially here in South Florida, actually, we have a shortage of available land to build. So some neighborhoods here, you cannot find a piece of property to build from ground up. You gotta buy a house from the 40s, from the 50s, the 80s, knock that down, and build a new one. Or you're just gonna fix up the house. You're gonna replace finishes, install the hurricane windows, hurricane doors.
You're gonna retrofit it.
You're gonna retrofit, but you're not gonna replace the structure of the house. That's hardly an option to do.
And most of people do that because to a point that if you completely demolish a house on these days, you're gonna end up losing your setbacks.
Right.
So you were decreasing the value, let's say, maybe of that property, because you cannot have that occupancy, that percentage anymore, right? So you are losing your setbacks. So most of people, even though they have the option, they don't want to do that.
Right. We have several clients that they bought a house in Coral Gables, and we literally kept 4 corner walls, but everything inside we had to change. Honestly, if you take a look at a drone photo of the house, you see that you guys are kidding, right? Because if we knock those exterior walls, 4 corners, we're gonna end up losing 5 feet on each side of the house, and that completely changes
Right.
the design, and the occupancy of the house. So there are several factors, but I would say that end of the day, it goes back to cost.
So we have bureaucracy. That's one thing that's stopping people from building the way they want to. Then there's obviously the cost, which is the number one thing that everybody is deterred by.
Correct.
But, I'm looking at this situation today, what's happening with the fires, people losing their homes in floods and hurricanes. And if I personally were going to be building a house today, those things for me would be more top of mind than the cost. Because, you can say you're saving money building a house, for a little bit cheaper, maybe saving $200,000 up front. But if that house gets destroyed and say insurance doesn't cover everything, then it's going to end up costing more in the long run, because
right.
Now you're going to have to rebuild. Some of it's going to come out of your pocket. You may lose priceless possessions like all these people in California did. So is it really worth saving that extra $200,000 if you're going to already be spending that much on building a home? To me, it doesn't sound like it would be, and I'm kind of surprised that that's the determining factor, because most people that you guys work with, because you guys are a small independent builder, and these are just regular people that want to build a house for themselves, right?
Correct.
It's not like you're trying to build 100,000 cookie cutter houses or whatever, all the same. You're trying to build a nice property that somebody would want to live in for a long time, and that's safe. And to me, it's surprising that most people use cost and safety as an afterthought. That's kind of interesting. And the fact that cities and counties and municipalities are stopping people from building homes the way they choose is also kind of a problem.
Right now we are talking about this because we just saw a lot of things happening,
Yeah.
But people forget.
Yes.
So a year and a half from now, you got a job raise, or you got moved to another city. You want to find a nice neighborhood for your family. What is available? I'll get this house, and that's it. And we can say that, yeah, if I'm building my dream house from ground up and I have the option of using concrete and other types of material that will help and layout of landscaping layout, they also help with wildfire protection, and I will end up spending between 800 and 1 million, perfect. I'm totally fine with spending a little bit more because it will even save me with the insurance. Insurance will be cheaper than that. But at the same time, people are kind of in a hurry, or they thought they found a good deal. They're looking at a neighbor, and the neighbor has a house that is 1.3 million, and the house is for sale for 800. So I'm gonna move in and spend $150,000 replacing flooring and painting, and then I'll stay there for 3 years, and later I can flip that and make money on top of that. They don't want to go back and think about the structure. Of course, you have several steps that you can, and cheap steps that you can implement on your house to help with that. We saw a lot of places, especially in the California fires right now, that they are completely destroyed. But at the same time, you see that the structure of the house is standing, right? So why that happened? And some of those houses, they even have fireproof windows. So how that happened? Well, you have several reasons, but specifically what happened in Palisades is like if you were in a blizzard, but instead of snowflakes were like amber.
Right.
And you have the Santa Ana winds, and it's kind of impossible. Imagine in your city, when you have a small fire in a house, you see 6, 7, 10 firefighters trying to put the fire, Can you imagine the whole neighborhood? And going through the several natural issues that they had, which the climate was way drier than it was supposed to be, that it's totally out of standard. And I think that happened as not one or two. It's like a airplane to crash. It's not one issue, it's not two issues. A sequence of problems needs to happen until the airplane goes down. I think that this is what happened over there. As an example, if you move it to a house, and even if you have concrete walls and fireproof windows, if your roofing overhang has a vent, and on that vent is not amber protected, any amber can pass through that, get to your roofing. Or if you have a vent coming from your bathroom that some way somehow it gets through and get to your bathroom or to your living room, your house will burn from the inside out. At the same time that people, they don't want to spend a lot of money, and they don't think about spending more money. Most of people, of course, not everybody, but they don't want to spend more money doing concrete houses and thinking about this type of construction. They can have cheaper solutions that they can implement on their current house to avoid this type. It's going to be fireproof at 100%? No, you cannot guarantee that.
Like but what are some things people can do?
Well, within, just an example, within 5 feet from your house, instead of having landscaping or mulch or something, you should have use gravel or use a concrete. You can have, instead of wood siding, do stucco. Even if your house, the structure of your house is wood, but your facades, you can use stucco. Will help on the protection against the fire. Within 10 feet or 15 feet, you can get rid of the trash, you can get rid of things or bushes or things that can get fire. Because remember, it's not only the fire coming through your house, it's the ember that the fire will send to your neighbor. Or maybe you have a 20 feet of clearance on your landscaping, on your backyard, you don't have any issues, and you have a stone wall or a concrete wall. But if your neighbor doesn't have that, you also have a chance of...
Or you don't clean your roof.
That's very important, actually.
Are always full of
leaves and things,
leaves and dry stuff.
How much it costs to clean your gutters? Come on.
Super fast to catch on fire. So little details that they're not that costly. It's maintenance.
Right.
basically maintenance of your house, of your surrounding, right?
That you can do to help
Right.
mitigate
To help.
that. You know,
Yeah.
we're not saying that was the cause.
Right. In a situation like this, like you said, is basically like a fire blizzard. So even that probably wouldn't have helped a lot of people, unfortunately.
Correct.
But yeah, I see what you're saying. So, we kind of covered then why people don't build out of certain materials and, why they're not trying to be more innovative with this sort of thing. But since you guys are builders and, the two most common scenarios we have basically throughout the country are we have fires. A lot of people have lost homes in fires. And then we have flooding, which can be due to a hurricane or something else. Some people got flooding up in Tennessee and North Carolina, places like that where they don't expect to see a flood. So the question is, how would you go about building a home in those two areas, like an area that's flood prone, maybe hurricane prone, like here in Florida? Or how would you go about building a house in California, for example, where the biggest risk is fire? Like, what are the steps you would take?
Earthquake.
An earthquake, yeah.
An
Earthquake is a subject that people, I think they're most concerned about it in California. I think for most people, they always ask, why cannot build out of concrete? And you can, actually, and you should, but it's always the cost problem. But that's one of the things that I will do if I was building a house there, or if I can ask my design team, the professionals around me, my GC, what are the best way to build a house. I would like to use concrete. I would like to use a roof that is fire rated. I would like to have a simple solution for the ember to not get into my house. Is the ember, the protection that you use for your vents. So this way you don't have the air flowing through your roof.
Your attic and
your
going
attic
inside the house.
Inside
Yeah.
your house, windows, of course, fire rated doors. So, and then you have your landscaping designer that can help you to have a nice landscape as everybody wants, especially in areas like Palisades and Malibu, all those areas that have a high-end construction, right? And you want to have a nice landscape, but you can have a landscape that will help you in those cases. And then maintenance. I think for California, that would be the most, like the topics, the construction that you should try to follow.
Pay attention to when you are building a house.
I don't know if I forgot something.
No, I think that's the main point. Like, you do a concrete wall structure, fireproof roofing, select tempered glass with fireproof windows. Your landscaping, you create a design that will have natural barriers so the fire doesn't get through your house. You have the ember protection mesh,
You
throughout
can
the
have
roofing.
the sprinklers, as a lot of people said and ask about, if there's a outdoor sprinkler that we can use. Yes, you can have. You have pump sprinklers that you can have. You can have your pool can help with the water.
These are the main points. And guess here in Florida, you have to respect the last flooding elevation that you have. Consult with
How do
license.
you mitigate that as a builder? I mean, what do you do to, try to prevent your property from being flooded? Because that's the number one thing that happens with people in a hurricane is they have flood damage, and that's not covered if they don't have flood insurance, or even if they do, it only covers up to a certain amount. So how do you prevent that other than just building on stilts? That's kind of the obvious way, but what are some other ways that you guys use to, prevent flood damage in a brand new house?
Flood is kind of a bit tricky, because it's something that it's gonna be applied to your house, and there's no much that you can do. At least we didn't have that much experience with that, like clients that had this issue. So the houses that we built, and everything must pass through approval from the city, and the city has the elevation that you must to comply, which is related to the last 100 years level of flooding. And as you said, it's the obvious solution. You needed to raise the houses. houses that were old, that were built in the 70s, the 80s, that they don't have hurricane-proof windows and doors will suffer more. Hurricane window or the doors will withstand that better. Some of those houses and situations that I remember that we passed through here in Miami, we built a hotel in South Beach, and there is no way that you can just raise the whole thing. It was an existing structure, so the city required us to create flood barriers in case of not only hurricane but too much rain that we have, and we needed to install those compartments to have the commercial spaces on the ground floor to mitigate, to alleviate the flooding,
the damage,
yeah,
because the flood is gonna happen anyways. So.
Right now with these barriers you can protect your space, but I don't think that we did that for a commercial space, for a hotel. I don't think that will be something cost effective for a house,
yeah,
you know.
Yeah, a residential.
And obviously about the hurricane, you need to respect every single project goes to the city and it's approved, and you need it to be within the 3 miles from the coast. You need to design and engineers need to make sure that your house will withstand a Cat 5 hurricane, and inland you can use a Cat 3 or Cat 4 hurricane. So you can use metal roofing. It's a good option for the roofing. You can use the reinforced concrete. You can use the hurricane-proof windows and doors, and that's pretty much the 3 main points that I would recommend for.
Okay, so one thing I want to ask then before we move on to the next topic is regarding the building materials and kind of the way they build houses, but I saw a couple of specific things that I want to address that I'm sure a lot of people want to know, like especially with the roof, because the roof is the number one thing that insurance companies these days are making people replace, even if it's not that old. And a lot of people are wondering, if metal roofs are so much better, why are people still putting on, shingle roofs? Another person said that, they put on a shingle roof and ended up being better than a metal roof because the metal roof blew away and the shingle roof stayed on because they use a lot of tar to put the shingles down. So what are some of the reasons or pros and cons of using either one of those materials?
I agree. I think I agree with the shingles. I think as soon as you have a tar and you glued that well, it will sustain better winds than a metal roof.
In a metal roof, you will have a lot of, when you have pressure and winds, they will have more movement.
Gonna have movement.
They screw the fasteners, they tend to lose, and you need to have more maintenance on that. Even though a metal roof will, the lifespan of a metal roof is way longer. It's like 7 years compared with, they say, 30 years of shingles. But at the same time, United States, 70% of the roofings are made of shingles. So it goes back to cost, and it goes back to culture, tradition to do that.
You need to have good professionals to install the metal roofs too, because that's when you have a good installation, and that's gonna help you to keep the roof in cases.
Some people complain about the noise, which you can mitigate doing the metal roof is noisier when it's raining than compared with the shingles. You can mitigate that with insulation, but again, you are adding cost to your construction.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that, because some insurance companies now are starting to require people to put metal roofs on their house now instead of shingle if they need to replace it. I see that becoming a trend here in the future in Florida, and obviously that's way more expensive. And It seems like that's the direction things are moving, especially if you want to have insurance on your house.
Correct. We had a client in Davie right now that we are doing a house. It was a small project, and we had the option to go either with metal or shingles. In shingles, it costly about $12,000 to do, and the metal was almost $30,000.
Right.
And will take longer to do those metals, so those metal roofing. So he ended up, again, I will go with the shingles.
Right.
Faster and cheaper. So
That's the common denominator.
Yeah.
Everybody goes for the
Yeah.
cheapest way possible.
exactly.
So even when a house looks nice and fancy, you see all these mansions around here that they build in Miami. It looks really nice, but they probably made a lot of those same decisions as well, right? No?
Yes.
So-
Yes. And I can give you another example. Like if you will do concrete roofing, besides the design limitation that you have, it will cost way more than a wood roofing, a wood truss roofing, and will take longer to build. And the weight of the concrete, it's heavier than the wood, so it will require more. You will end up spend more money on foundation. So your foundation that was supposed to be, if you're doing wood, was supposed to be a shallow foundation, just a grade slab and that's it. No, now you need to go deep. You need to, even some of these big houses, you gotta go with the concrete piles. So you're adding cost on top of cost. People sometimes compare, shingles will be $10,000, metal roofing will be 30. It's like a domino effect.
Right.
If you change something, it keeps adding, cost
One
to the
change
whole
can
structure.
affect the entire
Correct.
project. I see.
Exactly.
And then one kind of specific question here I just thought was interesting because especially since we deal with a lot of flooding here, one person said that they had flood damage during Hurricane Ian, and their question is basically this: their house is concrete block construction on a concrete slab, and they asked why aren't the walls sealed where it meets the foundation to prevent water intrusion? Because, or is it just something that deteriorates over the years? Because obviously, the flood comes, and if the water, if it was sealed properly, then they wouldn't actually have that water intrusion.
Correct. Well, there are several reasons that this could happen, but maybe the waterproofing was not done properly. Maybe it was an old structure that had to pass through some maintenance. It's kind of difficult to answer directly this question without seeing exactly the project.
Yeah.
Some of those houses, they apply the waterproofing on the junction between the slab and the walls only from the inside. They don't pay attention to the outside. So end of the day, you have hollow concrete blocks. I think he mentioned that it's concrete walls, right?
Yeah.
He has several hollow concrete blocks, and if he had a flood and they waterproofing only, I don't know, 1 foot of the bottom of the wall, the water goes to the top, gets to these hollow blocks, concrete blocks, and water. It always
Gets
finds
in
a
everywhere,
way.
yeah.
So that could be one of the options.
So we covered a lot about, how homes are built and materials and kind of the best way. So that kind of brings me to the next thing. Like in general, like in your opinion, from what you've seen with how homes were built in the past versus what they're doing today, do you think homes used to be built better than now? Because that's one top complaint that people have, especially if they're buying a home from a commercial builder. Like, for example, you're buying a home from Lennar or Pulte or whoever. Then, you see all of these news stories. People have all these defects and problems with these brand new houses. And then you can buy a resale home that was built in the 60s and, can be in better shape. So is that a myth? Is that true? Did they really build homes better back then than they do today? Because now we have new building codes that didn't exist then. So
that's a tricky question, actually, because you have more regulation right now. You are more strict to build, and at the same time, you see a lot of these problems. I guess one of the reasons that we see a lot, and it's a hurdle for everybody, is the lack of good manpower. It's hard to find a good plumber or a good AC contractor or a good carpenter today.
even craftsmanship in general doesn't really exist anymore. That's why you don't see those
Exactly.
Victorian houses and things like that being built.
Exactly.
Right?
And again, it's kind of boring, but you go back to cost, because you used to use solid core doors for your house. Right now, everything is hollow. So it goes back to the cost. What do you think is going to stand more? It has a longer lifespan. Of course, it will be a solid core door. That's just one example. But I also think that, as you mentioned, Lennar and the other big developers, they are talking about a huge scale. So they don't pay that much attention on small things, details. And end of the day, they are developers. So they are building that to make money. So if they are meeting the minimum requirement by the construction codes, that's totally fine. Everything is being inspected, it is approved, they move forward. If we, as a small general contractor company, we are having issues, it's hard to find good laborers. Imagine these big guys, that they are doing 30, 40,000 houses at the same time. So I think even though we have way stricter codes right now and more regulation, and we are in this regulation is increasing, after Andrew, after the Champlain Towers, for example, that we have the accident here in the disaster here in Surfside. They work to meet the minimum standard and move forward, make money, and that's it. So I guess that's one of the reasons that this is happening.
But so you think then, responding to his question, you think that the houses were before built in a better way, or no?
I would
the
say that
houses were better.
I would say that the quality of the material that we used before is way better than we have it right now. And I would say that we used to have way better labor, craftsmanship that worked on those houses. End of the day, they end up being more carefully built, let's say.
Right.
Even though the standards that we have today are higher than they were before.
I think technology and all the improvements that we have these days, they bring a lot to build a house. And I don't think that the houses were better in the past than they are right now. I just think there's a difference between who's building those houses and who's not.
Right.
Like back in the days, they had 10 houses to build, right? And people were doing like carefully and with probably the same materials that we have today, let's say. Wood and the same roof, let's put the same materials,
the
right?
Standards.
The same standards.
Materials.
Yes. But at that time, they were building 10 houses, right? Today, they're building 10,000 houses at once.
Sometimes
because everything is on a rush. Everything I need to make money. I need this ready for yesterday because
yes.
Right.
I have a time to finish this. Because if not, I'm losing money. Back in the days, you were like building the house because it was your dream house. You got your property. Right. You were building. You were growing your family there. Today is just like real estate craziness, you know, madness. Yeah. So I think if you put the same materials from back on the day to today, I don't think that is a better. I just think it's the way people are on a rush kind of thing. I don't know if I
that's another reason.
Right.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
So we definitely have a quantity versus quality problem.
Correct.
And also a very high lack of skilled labor for sure. So those are like the two things that maybe degrade the quality of the homes that are being built today, you would say.
Correct.
That's
why sometimes when you go to a local contractor instead of a bigger contractor, even though you can spend a little bit more, it pays at the end, because you have control of the people that are doing the work for you. I think at the end it's worth it.
One thing that people ask a lot, this wasn't in the notes here, but I've seen it a lot in my comments before, is it better to build a house or to just buy an existing house? People are always like wondering that, especially now with maybe if you live in an area where it's hard to find a house for sale. There are still some places that have inventory shortages, things like that. And at the end of the day, building a house can actually maybe even be cheaper with the price of homes today, wouldn't you say? Like depending on where you're going to build, you could end up actually even building a home for less money than buying an existing home.
Between both, if I have the option to build a ground up house and purchase an existing house, I will say that first I will take a look at the neighborhood. If it is the same price, if I'm gonna be doing the same investment, of course I'm gonna build from the ground up, because at least I know what we are building and I know the quality and I know I'm giving the requirement, of the things that I need of those houses. When you purchase an existing house, even though you have home inspections, you never know what you're gonna find inside those walls.
Yeah, that brings me to the next point too, because one thing that I see here is also a recurring theme is basically like finding a good contractor, corruption when it comes to, maybe letting some things slide when it comes to building a house, or that the builders can get away with. That's why you see all these mistakes and things like that. So what is your advice for finding the right builder, the right contractor, the right person that you want to hire? Say I definitely want to build a house. How do I find somebody that I know I can trust that is going to do a good job?
Well, the best way I think is word of the mouth. You ask your friends for recommendations.
What if you don't know anybody?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
That's a tough one.
Well, you gotta have several meetings with your contractor to make sure, that he really knows what he's doing. You have to do site visits, check what he's doing, check the portfolio, and it needs to be a crystal clear relationship. You need to understand where you're having your costs. Some of the contractors, they will give you, you will spend $100,000 or $800,000 on this, but you don't know exactly the scope of work. So you have to develop kind of a relationship with the contractor where you need to trust him. I guess the main point is, if you don't know anyone, you have to kind of follow him and be part, or at least check 2 or 3 projects that he's doing, talk to other clients, that he's building right now, to understand.
Go check the job sites, go check his work,
right,
and see the quality of the work. Ask this people that lives on these houses that, okay, he's a good contractor, he did a good job. Maybe the person has no idea, but you can see the quality of the construction, and these people can say to you like, oh, I have no leaks, I have no problems, 0 issues here. So you can kind of understand if it's a good contractor or not.
Or even if they had a problem during the construction, this is construction, problems happen all the time. So it's important to know how they deal with the problem at the time, the contractor and the client. I think it's pretty important on that, because most people don't understand about construction, and it's a challenge every single day.
What about like the big home builders? Is there any that you for sure would like stay away from? Do you know of any that are definitely terrible, or?
I will stay out of this question.
Prefer not to answer.
Yeah, I prefer not to answer.
I was advised not to move on with this question.
I think it's safe to say that there's probably some out there that probably are doing less than a stellar job.
Right.
Yes, but there's a lot of good developers and contractors around it.
Yeah.
This is a question that I kind of already know the answer to, but I would rather have you guys answer it. When it comes to building homes, it seems like a lot of the houses that they build now are no longer like 1-story ranch houses. Most of them are like at least 2 stories. They're building more vertical than horizontal these days. And a lot of the new homes being built are also in HOA communities. Why do you guys think that is?
Well, the main problem that I see is that land availability, especially here in Miami, for example. Like, it's totally different than Texas, or even Orlando, that it's a lot of buildable area that you still can develop. Over here you don't have. And end of the day, it goes back to how much money you can do when you're building those houses. Like if you have a property in Bay Harbor Island, for example, that you can do a single family home and we'll sell that for $2 million, or maybe at the same property you can do 4 townhouses and you can double your profit on top of that. It all goes back to the profitability of the project, the cost of the project. Like,
And how much money you're gonna make?
Exactly. We have a lot here that is technically oceanfront in Collins Avenue. The guy is asking $10 million for the lot. I can build my home dream, you know, I can see the ocean in Miami, it's gonna be perfect. Or I can go up to 4 stories and develop 60 apartments. What would be my my decision, you know? I think people always go back to there. Especially in these areas where you don't have that much land available to build.
So pretty much everybody is going for just maximizing the dollar now. No one really builds homes anymore for pride or to say, hey, look, this is the nice house I created. It's all about building as cheap as possible, making it look as nice as possible, and selling it for the highest possible profit. That's really what most people are trying to do.
Let's say that in the 95%, yes, but then you have the 5% where money is not a problem. Then the sky is the limit.
So how do you spot that as a home buyer? Like, say you're somebody out there, you want to buy a house. How do you spot the fact that this house was built better than the other 10 I just looked at, you know? Because somebody out there maybe did take that extra time and money to build a house that someone didn't, especially if maybe they even did that 30, 40 years ago. You're looking at an existing house. What are like some things you can look for as the buyer with how this house was constructed versus another house? Is there any, you know, green flags or red flags to look out for that matter?
Take an architect or a contractor that you know with when you are purchasing one house, because you need people that knows about the construction, you
Yes.
know. When you're doing a house, as we said, like most people are not thinking about the structure, but they're thinking about the type of tile, the type of the appliances. So sometimes you can have a poorly designed house, but with amazing finishes inside.
Yeah, most of people, they don't even understand plans. They cannot read plans, so they don't understand that sometimes most of your money, of the cost of your construction, goes inside the walls.
Yeah.
You're not even seeing, you know. So
Most people don't even know.
they don't understand that. So it's important when you are buying a property, if you have someone that has a little bit more of knowledge in construction, that you take that person with you, so the person can give you some insights like, oh, look, or maybe we need to check the roof, or maybe look, there's a little crack in here that who knows, structure, you know, just that kind of, because people, they just get into a property and they're like, oh, I like this.
Yeah.
You know, that's
Easy look.
exactly what I was imagining. Or imagine if I just remove this floor and put a different floor, and that's it. It's the perfect house. That's what I want. But then inside the walls, you don't know.
Or you get there and your wife loved the house, and then it's a problem because
There's
it's not
nothing else
only
you can
you
do.
anymore, it's your wife. So I'm just kidding, but going back, if you don't have a guy, a friend that understand, a contractor, you know, that you trust, that go check your house, the house, see if you really like it. And if you are thinking to move forward, hire a contractor to do these inspections, you know, to make sure that whatever you are buying, it's worth it. So do a construction assessment, go check the roofing, go check everything that you can, especially if you are thinking about retrofitting the house or remodeling the house, upgrading the house. So I'm gonna spend $3,000, $4,000 checking everything, maybe open some parts of the wall. Yes, it's totally worth it. It can save you $100,000 later.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes beyond just hiring a home inspector. That's something, you know, you can do that, but also if you're hiring a contractor that's taking it to the next level, and like you said, if you're planning on doing some renovations to the house, that's probably when it's the most important.
Exactly.
One other thing I want to touch on is whenever the house is finished, it has to go through like an occupancy inspection, things like that, to make sure everything has been done up to code and everything is done properly before the house gets its certificate of occupancy. So, you know, how are so many things slipping through the cracks? Because one person mentioned that there's probably a lot of corruption on this side of the equation, because how could you have so many houses that, you know, have so many glaring issues, but yet they pass this inspection and get that certificate of occupancy? Like, what do you guys see happening with that in this field?
Well, I think it's important to mention that when you are building a house from the ground up, you have several inspections. You don't have, it's not like talking specifically about the United States, because Brazil is different, Bahamas is also different. But here, just give an example, at the time that we are building a drywall, a wall, you need to pass plumbing inspection, mechanical inspection, electrical inspection, fire sprinklers inspection. Then you do the frame inspection. So you're bringing, just up to now, 5 inspectors to your project. After that, you do the drywall and you do the insulation. You have another insulation inspection, which everything that comes to your project, they check what is approved by the city, and they make sure that whatever you are doing, even when you close the drywall, they check the height, the space between the screws. So it is a process throughout the construction of the house that every single contractor must follow. And at the end, you have, before you get your certificate of occupancy, you also have to have a letter from your structural engineer stating that what he designed was exactly what was built. And you also have all the inspections from the city. If you're doing a ground up, it's kind of tough to have corruption on that, let's say, but it's not impossible.
I think I'm gonna bring back what I said before of the old houses to the new houses.
Yeah.
The rush factor. So what I have been seeing a lot is clients trying to hire private provider inspectors or private people to come and do those inspections in a way to accelerate the work, to speed up.
Yeah.
You know, because they are in a rush to make money.
Right.
Or because they are in a rush to get into that space.
Or because they built without a permit and now they needed to get a certificate
Another
of occupancy, like a
issue.
retrofit, and then they needed to pay somebody under the table so they can have the
Another issue
inspections
that
I see.
to move forward.
very serious.
So
People
it's-
are doing a lot of things, additions, work inside their houses or their properties without permits. I was at Miami-Dade County last week, and I had all these people. I was waiting to talk to one of the reviewers, and I was waiting, and I heard all these people like, oh, I did an addition, now they are charging me a lot of money because they figured it out, blah, blah, blah. They want permits, they want plans. Now I need to hire an architect. Now I need to hire an inspector, this and that. And just keep adding money. They just want my money. No. What they want is you to follow the codes so we can enforce, right, the codes and the regulations so they can keep your safety.
Right.
Or your neighbor's safety. These kind of things that people just don't realize, oh, I'm just going to do it without permit because
Why I need a permit.
why I need a permit? No one's going to figure it out, you know? But
So I think
it's
it is
worth it to your to your family safety, to your own safety, to your home safety. You know, when you have a hurricane and then you did a installation or a roof installation or any installations without a permit, and you had no inspections, no one checking it out if that was the right thing to do. So
it is a two-way situation actually, because at the same time that, going back to the question, you have some contractors that some way somehow pay to get those inspections move forward so they can sell the house and make money. At the same time, you have clients or you have homeowners that are trying to do the same thing because they don't understand the process and they don't understand that most of this it's done, these regulations are done to create a safe community, a safe neighborhood for everybody.
So just a couple more things I want to ask you guys and I'll let you go. So the first one is a very specific question, but I think it's relevant since we all live here in Miami. And somebody asked what would be like your tips or the best way to build an ADU here in Miami, because now they're starting to kind of like catch on, just like they are in California. More people are starting to do that, trying to either, you know, have an in-law quarters or make money, obviously off of Airbnb. Everybody's chasing the dollar. So what do you guys think is the best way to go about doing that here?
Get a licensed architect that has experience, you know, in designing that. Pretty much have everything ready. He will coordinate with you, but do your soil inspection to see exactly what type of soil you have. If you need to do your structure on top of piles, or if you can do a shallow foundation. Your shell, if possible, most likely if is here in South Florida, there will be reinforced concrete walls. Pay attention to the contractor that you are using. Make sure that your roofing he's using the correct straps and everything.
But other than that,
follow the rules.
because just follow
You know,
the rules.
follow the
Exactly.
rules.
Yeah.
Okay. And then one hypothetical question, which I think is kind of interesting, like if you were to build a house right now that you want to make sure is still going to be standing there in 100 years from now, how would you do it?
Cost is not a problem, right?
Cost is not a problem.
So don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. That's
Yeah.
That's not an issue. It's
That's-
really you
that's
have
not
to
an-
spend the right amount of money to make that happen. Essentially, is the answer to that
You
question.
have to plan. I think you have to plan wisely and put that plan in action. So as if you have the right professionals and you do things right, if we don't have the cost problem, even though if you have the right professionals, you're gonna get a
If
way.
you have a disaster or something, you know,
It's worth it, but if you have the right people working with you, you're gonna find ways to make it cost effective. You know?
I think
So-
that goes back to the thing
Oh.
that it is possible to build something that whatever it happens will stand 100 years. I think that was the question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is.
But I don't
So
think it
have
goes back to the correct contractors or something. It's more about the cost that if it's cost effective, because you can build a bunker, you can do your house on piles, you can do solid concrete walls, you can do hurricane proof with tempered glasses and, you know, double panels, a concrete roof, but it will involve a lot of money. So answering the question is yes, it is
Yes.
possible. It's totally possible. Now it's cost effective. That's the point.
Right. If anybody wants to reach out to you guys, has any questions, or is interested in maybe hiring you for a job, how can they find you?
They can take a look, as always, in our Instagram. It's turnies.company, and they can reach out. We can put on the contacts on your description, email, and also our website, turniesco.com.
Well, Natasha, Tiziano, thank you guys for doing this. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you.
Thank you for the
inviting
opportunity.
us.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I hope we clarify some of the questions.
So speaking of any other questions, maybe if there's something that wasn't answered here, make sure you put your questions down below in this video, and if we get enough good ones and the response to this video is good, maybe we can do a part 2 and address things that weren't addressed in this video. So if you enjoyed this, make sure you are subscribed to the channel, and if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.